Hey guys, it's that time of year again and the holidays are approaching quickly. And I've got two projects today that you can do that people will love. And they don't take a lot of work and they don't take a lot of money. So let's get started. Now I kicked this first project off by ripping some wood. I had three different kinds of wood I wanted to use for the arms on these salad tongs that I'm going to build. And I ripped them, and then I went on the bandsaw and cut them in half so I could run them through the planer. And why in the heck did I do that when I could have just used a thin rip jig and cut them easily? And believe me, that was a lot easier. Once I moved to the planer, I could thin these out to the thickness that I was looking for. Took about 2 or 3 passes on each side. Consistent thickness, which I really like. Now, if I didn't learn my lesson the first time on the table saw, well, yep, I moved to the miter saw this time and I was able to cut these strips to the right length much easier and much safer done. Now, I glued a couple pieces of wood together to add some character to what I call the neck of the salad tongs. And I wanted to make sure that I had a 2-degree angle on both sides of this neck so that it fans out the hands. And so I did that by basically sliding a piece of wood underneath one side, running it through the planer to cut that angle, and then it did it again on the other side. Worked really well. And this is how I'm going to glue it together, and I made myself a prototype, and at about 8.5 inches of length, these seem to have the right opening and the right character for them to be able to close completely. Okay, I made a simple jig with a piece of scrap wood and put basically one piece here and then drew a line at the center and went 8.5 inches. Now 8.5 inches gets me to the end of the tongs, and these work really well with that thickness and that length. So I put a little block here so I can support this like that, and then I can put these on here and go ahead and glue that in place, and I'll be consistent. Now I really don't like to mass produce pretty much anything. I like to build a couple of something. I like the challenge of designing it, trying to figure it out, all the angles, the length, what works the best. Then I kind of like to move on to another project that challenges me again. But in this case, for friends and family during the holidays, I thought it might be kind of fun to build a few projects that I could share some gifts with. So in this particular case, I toughed it up. And this jig worked out really well. I could kind of glue one, I could get the right lengths and everything, take it out and start another one. So I could basically do as many as I had clamps for. Once those were dry, I was able to cut off the excess wood on the end, and I was ready to move on to the next stage of this project. Now I have a piece of basswood here. Basswood is very soft, easy to work with, and I've kind of fixed this corner, so I got a good 90-degree corner here, and I'm going to use this to push this through and basically cut a groove in the bottom of these tongs like I did there. That was a sample with a jig I had. So I want to lean it back just a little bit. Yeah, I don't think it'll make that much difference, but if I lean it back the equivalent of this angle right here, which is 2 degrees, I can get a straight cut along there, and I'm going to put a piece of wood right through here to give this strength. I think that'll really help. So let's set this to 2 degrees here. And let's go ahead and find the right side. There we go. I just want to raise the blade enough so I can trim that off. That should do it right there. So I was happy with this block method to be able to cut the tabs in the table saw. It was safe and it was effective, and I was very happy with that. Once I got all those done, I could move on to gluing the tabs in the end. And I created 3 different kinds of, well, I didn't create, but I cut 3 different kinds of wood to glue in the ends of these and mixed them all up as I glued them together, just to give a little bit more character to the salad tongs. I had to sand some of these tabs down because it was such a tight fit, but it was a good snug fit, and I think that will help with some of the strength of these as well as the aesthetics. After all those were dry, then I could move on to my bandsaw and cut off the excess so I could start sanding these and finishing these projects. Well, first of all, I have to apologize for the camera angle here. I didn't get this quite right, but let me tell you what I'm doing. I wanted to sand off the end and both sides of the tong to make sure that tab didn't stick out. And then I curved the back side of the tongs as well, because when you pick these up, I want them to feel good in your hand, and they did. And then after that, I kind of rounded the ends of the tongs and the edges so there weren't any sharp edges on this. I didn't want anybody to poke themselves with it. And I like the aesthetically pleasing design that I ended up with in the end. So tell me, what do you think? Now, if that wasn't enough sanding, I had to do the finishing sanding work on this with 220 and 400 grit sandpaper, and I did all of that by hand. I wanted to make sure that I had a nice, smooth finish around the complete salad tongs. Once that was done, I was ready to apply the finish. I put 2 coats of cutting board oil on these. I like this oil for my cutting boards, and I figured this is food safe, so it would work on the salad tongs. It really does a great job of protecting the wood and brings out that clarity in the grain of the wood, and I really like how they turned out. If you use these and wash them on a regular basis, you're going to want to probably recoat those every now and then. I don't know, once a year or so, or when it starts to look maybe a little faded. It's good to protect the wood so it'll last a long time. Hey, now that is done, let's move on to the next project. Okay, you may be wondering what I'm going to make with this second Christmas gift, and I'm actually going to make epoxy coasters. Now, this will be a very interesting project, something just about anybody can do. First, I'm going to use these multicolored wood snowflakes in this gift. And I made these on a video about a year ago, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. They're pretty easy to make. You just got to be a little careful, and they turn out great. You can put these on packages, you can hang them as ornaments, or you can put them in coasters. So I'm going to actually put them in here and then coat this with epoxy and cut them into coasters. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The first thing I want to do is I built a tray, and with this tray I used some scrap wood, which is fine. I lined the inside of it with packing tape because it's got a real smooth surface and the epoxy won't stick to it. And I also sealed the corners with silicone because if this stuff leaks, it's kind of like lava. It'll go anywhere. It's hot, it's messy, and it can cause a lot of problems with your floor or your tabletop. So you want to make sure it's well sealed. The other thing you want to make sure is this is very level. You need to have this really level when you pour the epoxy because it flattens out and it takes a long time for it to dry. Now, what I want to do first is lay these out. I'm going to put some big ones in the center of where I think the coaster is going to be. And then I'll use some of these small pieces to put around it. And with these, I'm actually going to put a little dab of glue on the bottom and kind of stick them to the bottom so they don't float up too much when I pour the epoxy. And so let's go ahead and get started with that. Now, it doesn't take much glue to put on here. You just need a drop. Something to hold it down is all you really need. And of course, this stuff is really stringy. And I'm just going to put that right there about in the center so I know where it is. And I'll add some pieces around it when I get there. You certainly don't want the string parts to show, because it will show. So you got to be a little careful. So now I've got them all glued in, and the objective was to get one full star in each coaster and then just randomly fit it in with pieces to kind of fill in the gaps. And this will make 8 coasters. Okay, now to mix the epoxy, this is again a very simple craft epoxy, dries very clear, that I bought on Amazon, not very expensive, maybe 12, 15 bucks, something like that. I'll pour half of each in this container, which should be enough to do the whole thing. And I'm also going to add this white pearl to it, this powder. I'll mix it in. First of all, this clear, it has to be perfect or you're going to see defects. So if you put a little bit of this pearl in, it'll mask some of those defects. And then secondly, it gives it a really nice look with the snowflakes and kind of a white snow kind of look. It turns out really good. Now the other thing is I will mix this in a container, and this is just an old bottle that I had, and I can guarantee I'll throw this away when I'm done because it sticks to everything. So it's nice to have something that you can throw away when you're done pouring. But if you think you need it, you want to try to avoid getting too many bubbles. That will cause a problem for you, trying to get those bubbles out. But again, the pearl white will help prevent some of that from having a problem. You can guess on how much of the powder you want. Very important to mix it up really well. You certainly want to get all that powder mixed in, or you're gonna have problems. Now when you pour the epoxy mixture in, you want to go kind of slow, and I went way too fast here and way too thick. But once I got it all poured in, it was important that I used a spatula or something, in this case a piece of plywood, to kind of smooth everything out and make sure I get all the bubbles out, because there's a lot of bubbles that'll get created in between these stars, and you just have to kind of work it over time to get that out. Now removing the piece from the mold is really kind of a piece of cake. If you've got these screws to screw it together, it comes out pretty easily. And packing tape, of all things, is a great mold release. It works really well for small projects like this. Okay, I got it out of the mold. The top is plenty dry, but the bottom, which was sticking to this, didn't get that air, and it's still a little wet. So that was 36 hours, which I think was good. And now I'm just going to let it sit like this and give it a chance to cure really good, probably for another couple of days, and then I'll cut it up into pieces. Well, it's been 2.5 days since I first molded this. It feels very dry, so I'm going to go ahead and start cutting it up. A couple of things about cutting. First of all, I'm going to make the coasters 4 inches by 4 inches. I like that size. That's what I had before, and it's served me well. I buy these cork pads with their sticky back on Amazon for like maybe 11 bucks for 40 of them. They stick right on the back, so that's kind of nice. Easy to find. They have round ones too if you want. And so I'm gonna do 3 passes on this. I'm gonna clean up this edge, and then I'll use that edge to cut the other edge and then come back and clean that up so I can get a nice precise 4 inches. And then I will send this through the planer to plane off some of the top to make it look good and smooth. And then I'll go over to the miter saw and cut them to length. Pretty simple. So let's go ahead and get this set up here and we can make our first cut. So with that epoxy fully cured, I could now trim off both sides on my table saw. And as I said, I wanted to take 3 passes just to clean up and get good sharp edges. Then it's a matter of just planing the surface. That's pretty easy. It took me about 3 passes to do that. You want that wood grain to show, so you want to take enough epoxy off so that you can see the wood grain. And then I moved on to the miter saw to just cut them to those 4-inch diameter squares, and the piece was essentially done. I moved on to sanding the surface with 220 grit sandpaper, and then hand sanded the corners to kind of break the edge on those. And it's amazing how that wood grain pops when you put a coat of that Danish oil on top. Yeah, very happy with the way they came out. They're very solid, easy to use. Well, that's it for today. 2 easy gifts to make, and they look great. You could give these away as gifts for the holidays. They don't take very much time to make. Or you could sell them. I think you can make a lot of money off of selling these kinds of items. So I hope you enjoyed watching today's show. This is Dave with Level Up Woodworking, and I would certainly appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.